Great. Welcome, everyone, to our meth and fentanyl co-use panel. This is a harm reduction focused conversation hosted by the San Francisco AIDS Foundation with our partners from San Francisco Drug Users Union and GLIDE. My name is Laura Thomas. I'm the Director of Harm Reduction Policy here at the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. We are holding this conversation today in honor of International Overdose Awareness Day, which is today. I imagine many of the folks on this call are aware of that, and many of us have lost people to overdose. So I wanted to start out with a brief moment of silence in honor of the many people that we've lost to overdose, the many heroes of this movement, friends, colleagues, family members, partners, and those that we didn't know who could have contributed so much to this movement. So I want to start off with a short moment of silence. Thank you and welcome to this panel. We're going to move right into the conversation. One of the things that inspired this panel is the fact that meth and fentanyl, and particularly meth and fentanyl co-use, is somewhat different here in the San Francisco Bay Area than it is on the East Coast, in Canada, and other parts of the country. And we wanted to be able to hear from some of the experts on the ground about what it is that we're seeing, what's happening, and how we are responding here in the Bay Area, in the hopes that we have some lessons learned that may be of benefit to other folks, and to have a conversation amongst ourselves about what's going on and how best to respond. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to dive right into the conversation. Our first two panelists are Ro Giuliano and Rob Hoffman. They co-direct the syringe access services here at the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. Daniela Watke from GLIDE, a longtime harm reductionist here in San Francisco, is going to speak. We are joined by both Ms. Ian and Patrick from the San Francisco Drug Users Union, and then Wayne Rafus from the Stonewall Project here at the San Francisco AIDS Foundation is going to speak. Our plan is to then have some facilitated conversation with everyone, and then we will open it up to Q&A. You should have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to put questions in as we go along through this, and we'll collect the questions and try to get to as many of them as we can at the end. And with that, I want to introduce Ro Giuliano.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ro. So a couple of months back, we were super inspired by Chicago Recovery Alliance's webinar on stimulants, and it made us think that SF and the Bay Area really needed to get together and have our own dialogue on our own very unique drug landscape and the ways in which we use those drugs, particularly meth and fentanyl. So, you know, the Bay Area has always had good drugs. Looking at our history in the decades before the 2000s, San Francisco's always been known for its art and music scenes and our robust drug culture. So whether that was opium in the late 1800s and early 1900s, to the cannabis, heroin, psychedelics, ecstasy, and crystal meth came on the scene in the 90s, and then the synthetic opioids as the years progressed. So for many, it seemed that folks often fell into one or two camps, like people who like opiates and then people who like meth. So there's always been some degree of mixing and matching, like back in the day, one-on-ones that you could score at 16th and Mission, or folks always like goofballs. But for the most part, folks picked a direction for their primary use. So either like to go up or you go down. So in recent years, with the shifting drugs landscape and drug market, things really don't look as much like they used to. And we're seeing lots of folks at our programs and in our communities using both together, not necessarily in the same shot, just part of your daily routine. So traditionally, SF always had tar heroin. The rule was east of the Mississippi, you had powder or China white, and west of the Mississippi, we had black tar heroin. So, folks are here from other places. It's just a cruder form of heroin, maybe a little closer to opium. It's a resinous substance, and you could really only smoke it or inject it. And that being a resinous substance like that made it harder to cut it with fentanyl. And so we remain like oddly insulated from fentanyl in our drug supply until more recently. So in true SF style, when fentanyl came on the scene, it wasn't so much as a contaminant, but simply as another drug that you could buy. And then it began to dominate the opiate market. So through that, folks have found ways to make this work for them, often by incorporating meth maybe into their daily routine to achieve the high they're going for. So yeah, we've all gotten together today to talk about this. And I'm going to hand it over to Rob to get us started.
Thank you, Ro. Hi, I'm going to just talk a little bit about my personal experience and the personal experience of others close to me. And some of the things I say, like, people might have a different personal experience with this, and that's okay. So in 2013, this is not my personal experience, 2013, under 3,000 of the overdose deaths were attributed to fentanyl or like synthetic opioids. And then in 2018, it went all the way up to 31,355 deaths in the U.S. Related to fentanyl or other synthetic like opioids. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about two drug landscapes that coincided at the same time. First, talking about the online drug landscape for fentanyl. So in 2014, fentanyl was being sold for 90% cheaper than heroin online. There was a ton of fentanyl being sold online and a ton of information about what you were buying, both from vendors and from buyers. A lot of harm reduction information and just a lot of stuff about, the potency and the analog, etc. We saw a raise in the price as we went through 2015 and 2016 to kind of stabilize at around $100 a gram. And this is like up from like $20 and $25 a gram. And then what happened with Alpha Bay went down in July 2017. Shortly after that, the Hansa market banned the sale of fentanyl. And then today, fentanyl is banned on dark web markets. So for the purpose of this, I went on some markets this weekend trying to find listings. I was only able to find one listing without a lot of information that was probably fentanyl for around $140 a gram. But, it was just posted on August 22nd, and I don't know if it will stay up. Other than that, I wasn't able to find that. And when I think about some of the things about harm reduction for people who were able to purchase drugs online, one thing that really sticks out was in San Francisco in 2015, and then again in 2019, we saw Xanax pills and other pills that contained fentanyl being sold on the street. And people that worked in harm reduction, we did a lot of work trying to educate people around pressed pills that contained fentanyl. But those same pills were being sold online as fentanyl with the exact amount of how many micrograms or milligrams are in each pill, what analog, so on and so forth. And so as we kind of move into there being no fentanyl for sale online, or just not being able to find fentanyl for sale online, we saw an emergence of fentanyl in San Francisco on the streets. From my personal experience, I say like as early back as 2016, I can think of people selling fentanyl on the streets, not necessarily like phone call type of thing, but just like people on the streets selling fentanyl. And the price of that fentanyl was extremely high. It was roughly around $20 for a tenth of a gram. And it continued like that throughout 2017. But the same way with the other market, it was like we started to see a lot of fentanyl on the street. And then people started to switch to using fentanyl. We also heard a lot about drug poisoning and fentanyl poisoning. But, one thing that was my experience was that it wasn't necessarily a lot of poisoning, a few mistakes here and there, but mainly that people were just using the substance. And then as we get into 2019, we started to see the price of fentanyl in the streets drop considerably down to like $50 and $60 a gram, sometimes even cheaper, which then again, if you have a market that's got a bunch of something flooded with it and the price goes down, more and more people are switching over to using fentanyl. Some of the things that I think about when I think about the difference between these two markets, and also the information that you get in the street market is, you have a lot less information in the street market. There was lots of different things in the fentanyl on the streets. People had shared like putting water on a white substance and watching it turn dark gray, injecting fentanyl and having your heart race really fast and then also nodding. Lots of different things that you weren't necessarily seeing on the online market. And in addition to that, also like people that had fentanyl tolerance would report that the fentanyl in the streets was actually very weak. And so when you have like any other impact of the war on drugs, where a lot of these markets started online, stopped selling this drug because of law enforcement, and because of not wanting to be targeted and have law enforcement working that much harder because of the rise in fentanyl overdoses. You have the street market where all this information isn't available to people. And then I think one last thing I want to say about these markets is, that heroin has become less and less and less available and the price has gone up. And then fentanyl, the vendors on the streets in San Francisco now have even started to have multiple kinds of fentanyl. And there are fentanyls reported that are for smoking, and fentanyls that are supposed to be for shooting. And vendors will ask you if you want smoking fentanyl or shooting fentanyl. And this is something, that's kind of new to this market. I think with that, I'm gonna just kind of close out and pass it over to Daniela.
I think actually, Rob, I was going to jump in and then Daniela.
Pass it over to Ro. Excuse me. Right.
So I'm just going to speak to a little bit about what we were seeing at the Harm Reduction Center on 6th Street in SF when things started to really shift, I would say like spring 2018. And so just speaking to that, some of the fastest adaptations to a changing drug landscape is probably always going to be created by the people who are using those drugs, right? So in this moment of like newer opioid synthetics, folks needed to be creative and innovative to achieve a high that would work for them. So, fentanyl could have a really strong effect. So the nod could be really, really heavy. And for some people, they've found that maybe too heavy. And so smoking versus injecting could somewhat mitigate that effect. And, at first, I think people thought it would mitigate the overdose risk. I don't know if that has necessarily played Because we definitely see people overdose from smoking. We've definitely seen people have fatal overdoses from smoking. So part of that was, maybe incorporating meth into the picture, into your daily routine to increase the functionality of such a heavy high. I don't know, I kind of almost liken it to, like, I don't know if folks know this expression, like the Santa Cruz speedball, like when you do a bong load and then you have a nice coffee. So it's like, it's not that you're doing them together, but it's just part of the mix to get your kind of head straight for the day. So there weren't really existing tools on the market per se, like, so it's that, like, it's more accurately, folks are smoking it off a piece of foil. I guess more accurately, you're vaping it off a piece of foil. And, it's just the same way that you might smoke tar off foil. But when you smoke tar off foil, you're losing so much, it's not really efficient or economical. So most folks that would have a regular daily heroin use in the past wouldn't really use smoking as their mode, and we had always had like sheets of, like, what we call burrito foil, that like really thin foil that, a small number of folks would want that did smoke tar. But folks started really smoking fentanyl off it, and we were hearing back from folks that it just really wasn't the right tool for the job. So we started ordering a bunch of different types of foil. And Rob, please jump in at any point. Various thicknesses, straws, and glass stems of various sizes. At the Harm Reduction Center, we got together like 2 focus groups of participants to talk about the best ways to smoke fentanyl. And, we paid everyone for their time. We gave lots of samples to everybody. And so the first week we just talked about, smoking fentanyl in general, what people were finding, what they thought would work best. We loaded up everybody with the samples. And then the next week we met again at the same time, and everybody shared their feedback and decided, put their kind of votes in for what their favorites were, and the best straw options. So folks really liked Pitmaster. Folks liked the hard cardboard straws because they didn't melt like the plastic ones. They liked glass stems, the standard length, because we had these hella long, like cocktail straws, I guess they were marketed as. And then all together, we kind of crafted some best practices to explain how to smoke fentanyl off foil. And we put together a safer fentanyl smoking flyer. Rob, did you want to talk a little bit about how that played out with mobile sites and other community partners?
Sure, yeah. At the mobile SaaS sites, where we had already built relationships with people and kind of knew just from those relationships who was using fentanyl, who was smoking fentanyl, we also provided those same things, those different options. I just want to say, like, when I was purchasing and looking for products to purchase for people to try, we also were like collecting some information on what was better. It seemed that the thinner foils were having the fentanyl burn up too quick. And so we were trying to find some really thicker foils. And I think I even went a little bit too far, because some of that stuff was like so thick, it was almost like sheet metal. But yeah, so we put a lot of these supplies out to participants, got input back from them, and then, we gave that input to Ro, who was working with the group. And I think I'll just cut back out there.
Thanks. Okay. And so, and in doing that too, it was like that weird moment in harm reduction, right? Like where folks have shifted from using needles to smoking. Like it's always been a thing out there, right? Like you've heard these harm reduction messages. Oh, you could smoke instead of inject. Because, traditionally, especially with tar heroin is super acidic and can really tear your veins up, right? Like you see really heavy soft tissue damage from longer term tar use. And so, you would tell folks, oh, you could smoke, but it would totally not be economical. It would be like a huge waste of drugs. So nobody was really realistically ever going to do that. But fentanyl kind of changed the game on that, because you could smoke and get just as high. So it was just this weird harm reduction moment where folks did switch. Some folks did switch from using injection modes to smoking. We also started seeing folks who had just started using opiates and just were using foil, like they came into the game with smoking and not injection. So then that situation highlighted kind of another unforeseen situation, was that all the Narcan we have is injectable. And when folks don't inject and it's not second nature, in that crisis moment when someone's falling out, they're not as comfortable using injectable Narcan, and injectable Narcan can almost become this barrier, right? And so this situation necessitated the need for us to get nasal Narcan, so we could provide this group of folks, primarily consisting of younger folks, the appropriate tools they needed to stay alive. So, we still don't have enough access to nasal Narcan to address the need. It's only the injectable. So which is different in and of itself from other cities and states in the US that have a larger access to nasal. So it was this weird, we think about how these things intersect in all the different parts of our work, right? So here's the intersection with overdose. And then COVID comes on the scene, and getting safer smoking equipment out to folks becomes even more important, because sharing smoking equipment could increase your risk of getting COVID. So it became even more critical. So yeah, I guess that's what I kind of wanted to say about, as a program, how we responded to the shift and how to make sure our community had kind of the right tools for the job.
Yeah, thank you, Ro and Rob. It's good to hear about how you engaged participants in making these decisions and making sure the folks who were using the foil were able to weigh in on what worked best. And it's Pitmaster it's Reynolds Pitmaster is the one.
Yeah, Reynolds Pitmaster's Choice.
Pitmaster's Choice, thank you. I got that wrong.
And a standard crack stem, as opposed to the extra long Pyrex cocktail straw.
And then just, from a harm reduction perspective, to amplify what Ro said about, it's been a longstanding harm reduction message that smoking is generally safer than injecting, because we know with injecting, even with sterile equipment, you can, there you go. Thank you, Patrick, for the visuals. To avoid the potential of HIV and Hep C transmission and bloodborne and soft tissue infections. So it's good when people can stay smoking. And thank you. So Daniela, do you want to talk about what this is looking like from your perspective at Glide?
On Fen in particular, or should I take it away with my own little angle? Yep. Okay.
Yep. Go for it.
So I'm actually here to talk today about meth, and I'm your token overdoser for the panel. It is indeed possible to overdose on meth despite some of the rumors to the contrary. So I wanted to tell you today what happened and tell you some of the errors that I made along the way, and then tell you the story of how it all went down, because it was a little bit different than I expected. I'm just going to start my timer here. I'm a little nervous. This is definitely the first time I've talked about this publicly, so even though y'all aren't like super public, it's still a big deal, so thanks for your patience. So meth is actually the #1 drug of overdose west of the Mississippi. It's implicated in more overdose deaths than even fentanyl, amazingly. 16,000 people in the United States died last year, with the primary cause of death being methamphetamine toxicity, which can then lead to an acute health problem. Usually it has to do with heart attack from arterial vasospasm. Meth shrinks blood vessels, including blood vessels that surround the heart. So people will have increased need for cardiac work because of the increased heart rate due to the release of adrenaline. And then their heart will not be getting enough oxygen to keep functioning. The other main acute cause of overdose is stroke. Some ischemic, meaning like a clot gets up in there, but also primarily hemorrhagic stroke. So spike in blood pressure leading to a bleed in the brain. And of course, both of those conditions can be very devastating and can kill people. So what happened to me? Well, I had started using meth on occasion over the past year or so, and I picked up a bag, and my first mistake was like not knowing exactly what I was taking. You know, I searched all over the place, like Heroin, for example, which was like my Bible of my 20s. It hasn't been updated since 2005 on methamphetamine. I know that the scene has just tremendous since then. And there's a lot of word of mouth information in the meth community about what's in the meth. I found that it's not entirely, doesn't entirely jive with the plentiful amount of research and reading that I've been doing. And I have receipts for all the things I'm saying, by the way. So if you're interested, you're always welcome to email me. Quick history of meth. It was invented in 1919 in Japan. It was used for narcolepsy and fatigue. And then it was used widely in World War II by soldiers on all sides. It was then picked up recreationally for the first time in the 70s and 80s, which is called crack. Because bike gangs generally put it out, and they would put it in the crankcase of their motorcycles. So that was made from a precursor called P2P, and it resulted in a racemic molecule like levo and dextro. With meth, active form is dextro, and levo has very limited effects. It's actually what's in Vicks nasal inhalers. It helps clear up sinuses, that same thing, constrictive action.
Daniela, your audio is really getting kind of distorted. I'm so sorry, but I want people to be able to hear your story.
Okay, you want me to log off and log back on?
You're good right there.
Okay,
I think.
Well, we'll give it a shot.
It oddly seems like when you lean in, it gets worse, but that could not be real, but that's what it seems like to me. And when you're further back, you're clearer.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a heads up if turning off video should help. Oh, that would be a huge relief to turn off the video. But let me know what I should do.
You're welcome to try turning off the video if you want.
Okay. How do I do that? Stop video. How's that? A little better?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, that makes me less nervous too. So the recent scene is that, you know, we think about like the backyard meth lab kind of stuff. That was really in the 90s, using pseudoephedrine, made the molecule of method. Often have a lot of unspent reagents, other contaminants. So it doesn't often form that we know, like dextro, which is crystal meth. But what happened in 2005 kind of changed everything. And that was the Combat Methamphetamine Act that went through Congress and was signed by the president, which restricted, you know, California, if you're diet. And those restrictions essentially started the beginning and of domestic production of meth. Cartels.
We still can't hear you, Daniela.
Dang it. I don't know. Okay, I'll just leave and come back, I think. I'm sorry.
No, it's
I have no idea what it is.
It's not your fault. Do you want to call in by phone?
Sure. If somebody wants to go move on, and I'll come back.
Yeah, because I really want to hear what you have to say. Emily Land will be in touch with you about making sure you've got the right phone number for this.
Okay.
And then we're going to move forward with Miss Ian and Patrick. Are you all ready for your close-ups?
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay.
Do you want to, we're ready, we're going. Okay. So, Hi, I'm Miss Ian. And me and Patrick work at the San Francisco Drug Users Union. I'm not sure, like, do you think there's a lot of people who want like some general info too?
What is the San Francisco Drug Users Union, and what do you do
Gotcha.
in 10 seconds?
In 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
Oh my god.
Gangsters.
I'm kidding.
Oh, not supposed to out us yet. That's for the end. That's the finale. So we're a needle exchange. We're in Fantastic Street in the Tenderloin of San Francisco, and I would say like maybe our niche space in the harm reduction world and the needle exchange world is that we are like 100% run by people who actively use drugs or have formerly used drugs or have been formerly incarcerated for some sort of drug, something, use, selling, whatever. So, and it's because I think we really view that if there's going to be some significant change in the future of drug policy, that if, I guess, our voices aren't heard, respected, or taken into account, then it just, we won't have any real meaningful change. And I think that it also works in this fantastic way to have people who feel like they are not part of the larger community or society or your city, or not respected as neighbors, feel like they are giving back and not feel like they're just actually living in a stereotype that they can't escape. So, it's fun to be on this panel, but it's interesting because it was hard to think of like what I would talk about via meth and fentanyl from my position as sort of a, I guess like a manager role in this world. And because people here use, I guess that most people were using heroin, and lots of people mixed with either cocaine, crack, or speed. And when, I guess, Rob sort of gave us the history, but when it switched over and fentanyl became a little bit easier to purchase and less chaotic, it felt like, or crazy of a drug, that people started switching over because it, from what I saw, it was like, it was simpler, it was easier, it was a quick way to sort of get your opiate high or that feel or any of that stuff, your fix, whatever it does for you specifically. But it was quicker. There was like not all of the frustrating and super irritating pokes where you're poking everywhere in your body to try and find that spot, your go-to. And which was from my managerial role as people were coming into work, I got more people to come in on time because it is easier for people to smoke something than it is if you like can't find that vein. You're just spending sometimes up to an hour trying to figure out which vein is going to be the one that you're going to use. And if you don't find something, then people are coming in really, really frustrated, really sick, and sometimes really sweaty, which isn't always the most pleasant sight for someone who's coming in to get services. And so, I don't want to say like as a boss, fentanyl's been a blessing, but I want to say it was an interesting change from my perspective on that front. I think I would just echo what Ro had said too, that people have been mixing like a low and a high since drugs existed. And for people who don't know, a lot of that too is for just a lot of functional reasons, being like if you are outside, it's not good to do your drugs and then fall asleep with all of your stuff around you. It's like then you wake up, whatever it is, if it's either 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or 2 hours later with everything gone, including your shoes sometimes, that it is nice to be able to get the high, get the fix that you want, and also mix in a little bit of it up so you don't fall all the way out, or you're not totally asleep or totally nodded, you're a little bit aware. And for a lot of people, whether it's informal work or formal work, that you are still, I guess what we would like functional. You can go do the things that you want to do. You can be accountable as well. I would say there's also like there is a positive, or like there is a good vibe and a positive feel for a lot of people I've noticed who have stopped using syringes. So lots of people.
6 months personally.
Right. And people, like, it's an accomplishment, you know, and it was an accidental accomplishment for a lot of people, but it feels really cool because I think a lot of people felt like they would never ever stop using needles, and then all of a sudden they just haven't for like a half a year for Patrick, right? And the one thing what I would say after that, and then I'm going to pass it over to Patrick to give you all the ins and outs, is that there has been, and this is, I would say, like just fentanyl related, which we already know, but it keeps increasing, is there's a lot more stress on our job because there is a lot more people running in, because we're street level, just like AIDS Foundation at 6th Street. We're street level where people are just running in and screaming, "We need Narcan, we need Narcan, we need Narcan." It's a lot more often than it was previously, and which is fine, and we've never lost anybody, which is great. But it's not to say that isn't stressful, right? But those are the big things for me that I would contribute. And then and Patrick.
Well, I just want to say also, to start off, thank you, Ms. Ian, for even giving me the opportunity to actually get a job and fucking be accountable and still, but also not judged based on my drug use. And I've noticed that, like Ms. Ian was saying, like the needle, like people not using needles anymore is kind of like, I don't know, it's weird. I never thought that I was going to stop using needles at all, ever. Definitely not.
Is it weird to be like, and not just like a week, but like you just said 6 months?
Yeah, no, 6 months, that's crazy. That's crazy as fuck.
Can I ask you to say the thing that you said to me too about like, how often did you used to get arrested?
Oh yeah, it's been a year since I've been to jail. Since I haven't been to jail in a year, and that's the longest it's been that I've been to jail since I was 13.
And then how long have you been working here?
Like a year or so, right?
Fancy that.
But yeah, no, that's too. But that has nothing to do with fentanyl and crystal meth use, because jail is still definitely a factor for a lot of the people that are out there who still have to boost and do things like that. But I'm like drawing a blank right now about everything I want to talk about, and I have notes in front of me, but they're not helping. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Go with that color coding. With like how fentanyl's different colors.
Oh right. Because I think it was like Rob who was talking about how many like different kinds there are, and lucky for everyone, I know every kind. There's purple, which is primarily for shooting. Blue, definitely for shooting. Yellow is like the main one that's for smoking. It's just because of the way that it burns when you do put it on the foil. And then there's pink, which is for either or. And the potency varies throughout each one as well. And also just recently, thanks to vape juices, go figure, they've been coming out with flavored fentanyl. Watermelon, lemon, lime, like hella crazy different flavors. But I've noticed with that stuff that the potency isn't there. So it's just more for the flavor. But yeah, and people mix them a lot too. A big thing is like getting blue and yellow, because it smokes better if it's yellow, but it's more potent if it's blue. Like there's a lot of different shit that goes into it, but talk about I mean, for me, one of the things that's been real crazy is the withdrawal
Fentanyl is really
it's
insane.
more intense, but it seems to be quicker. It seems to get out of your system quicker. So like it's not that 7 days of withdrawal that you would normally go through when you were doing heroin, but it's a very intense withdrawal.
Yeah.
And it's very stomach oriented, a lot more nausea and throwing up and diarrhea in comparison to where heroin that can happen. But I think that it's more, the movies kind of made it a little bit more dramatic than it actually is. I'm just being honest, you know?
I would say too, there's been like from our point of view, like as we're speaking, this is all anecdotal. So this is all coming from the people that we serve, some of the staff. But some of the things that have also been interesting to me, which I would love to know more science about, is like that heroin doesn't actually fix a fentanyl withdrawal.
No, not in my experience.
For anecdotally. And then also a thing that's been really intense is that everyone sort of has shared if there's like a intense sweating that happens, the stomach issues, and then also like this really insane, uncontrollable anxiety that comes with a lot of like negative poor self-worth stuff.
Also, something that's crazy and that I really don't know much about, and I'm curious about it myself, but it's something that I can say more than half of my peers, my friends that are out there are experiencing, is that since they've moved over to fentanyl, anytime that they do inject heroin, they have this like crazy intense like antihistamine rush where they swell up, and it's like very like the pins and needles is no longer a comforting feeling. It's actually like painful. Like it's very similar to like anaphylactic shock, which is weird. I don't know why that would even be, but that's like a lot of people are experiencing that right now. A lot. So
we came with the anecdotes.
Just saying.
Do we hit our 10 minutes?
Yep.
More.
With
Sorry.
the colors, when you're talking about the colors, is it the actual substance itself or is it the packaging?
It's the actual substance itself. Sometimes it's only once you like light it, it'll come white, but then when you light it is when it turns that color, like when you start to burn it. But for the colors, like for the pinks and the purples, the actual fentanyl is that color. I've also noticed the more vibrant the color, the less potent it is. The more on like a pastel-y baby side of the color is the stronger stuff.
And in general, do folks report finding fentanyl to be a shorter lasting
Yes.
experience?
Yeah, most definitely. I definitely feel that if it's smoked, it has a little bit more of a legs than if it's shot, which is weird. I think most of the time people would think that would be the other way around. But when it's shot, it seems to, its life is not very long whatsoever. It's like, I said the other day to one of my friends, I was like, I'm so happy that it's been 6 months since I've used a needle, but it sucks because I can't help but feel like if I don't constantly have a foil in my hand, that I'm not okay. I'm not well. It's like, you know what I mean? And like, obviously when I'm at work, I can't do that, but it's still like, always in the back of my mind, and it's strange,
And are there any folks at the union who've transitioned from fentanyl to buprenorphine?
There are, not that isn't like a way that it's more like a back and forth, if that makes sense. So there's like lots of people who have gotten on buprenorphine and methadone, but though they go back and forth. And so, and also when people are getting on, and just because we notice that as a pattern, like a pattern, like a 90% of the time pattern, that we ask people to be really careful when they're getting on buprenorphine. That is like, one, you're not failing your life if you move back into using drugs, but also be careful, you might be losing some of your tolerance. So find a friend. Don't use that first time alone.
Yeah.
And that's been helpful.
It's always good. All right. Well, I think we've got Daniela's sound issues sorted out.
Yay.
So we'll go back to Daniela. Thank you for working through all of this. You're muted.
Sorry. No,
I'm
thank
so
you.
sorry, guys. Can people hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me through the regular computer?
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't know if now I'm supposed to talk into this or what. So just tell me if I need to switch back to the phone, please. So what was I? I was talking about how we don't.
Phone. But you're muted.
From the panel.
Where is Daniela? Someone get her.
What if I sit back? People keep saying I'm too close to the computer. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. All right. So I was talking about how we're not really sure what's in the meth based on what's available widely on the web. And because drug checking is illegal in this country due to the RAVE Act, or also known as the Crack House Act, that doesn't allow the pouring of illegal substances.
Roll back there, Danielle. Wheel the chair all the way back.
I don't. This has never
Well,
happened
forward,
before.
stay back.
Okay, so I'm trying to read my notes a little bit. So I was describing just the evolution of meth, and I think that I had stopped around 2005, which is when pseudoephedrine became restricted in the United States, which it started the beginning of the end for domestic production. The Mexican cartels saw an opportunity and started manufacturing, setting up like super labs. Initially, they used pseudoephedrine as well until it was restricted there. And then they started getting very creative about their synthesis. So what we know now, based on really recent sort of reverse engineering by the DEA, is that cartels are using nitrostyrene and converting it to P2P, which results in a levo and dextro equally split molecule that does not form shards, but then they enrich it afterward to get to all dextro. So we know from recent samples that the meth is very pure, and it's nearly all dextro, which is the kind that actually causes euphoria by crossing the blood-brain barrier. So I did not know that at the time that I had purchased this particular bag, and I thought it was bunk. You know, I thought it was half cut, like everyone had been telling me. So my next mistake was I consulted people online for the dose. Those people happen to be much more tolerant than I was at the time. And I was given an approximate dose of 250 milligrams, or 0.25 if you're talking about points. And that's, I wasn't going to mention a specific number because the number is so relative to one's tolerance that I should not be attached to that particular number, but rather think about how meth actually is active.
Danielle.
I'm sorry?
Move
Back
back.
up a little.
Meth is active at only 5 milligrams. So it's needed to start like a lot lower, obviously, than it did for me, for somebody who had just a handful of experiences with it. I also did not know how much I was taking. I used the scale, and I trusted that I knew how much was in the bag, which now I have gone back afterward now and tried to like weigh out that same amount and realized that I was tremendously off. So how much I ultimately take, I'm not sure. To be honest with you.
Daniela, love,
Yeah.
can you push back a little bit or just pick up the phone?
Yeah, the phone is not working.
You just have to unmute
Okay.
yourself on the phone.
I don't know how, sorry.
Okay, just roll all the way back and don't come close to the computer.
I don't understand.
We love you, keep going.
Okay, maybe if I turn off the phone too. I just hung up. So, and the way that the street is commonly by price rather than by amount. Like you'll buy like a 10 or a 20, and the amount in the bag actually changes depending on the market value. So again, you just never know what's in the bag. And I also found out later that the guy decided on me and threw in extra. So there's even more in there that I anticipated. Finally, my biggest downfall there was I used a new route of administration. I did not look up the bioavailability and find the bioavailability. Okay, I'm going to say this in front of 400 people. I booty bumped. That is what I did. We talked about in harm reduction, it being a safer alternative to IV drug use. So I thought, I'm reducing harm. I remembered that the bioavailability of morphine in that way from my days in medicine, it was about 50%. So I was thinking, call it about half. It's really more like 99% with meth. So it was just way too much. So please look up your route and how much is actually absorbed into your bloodstream. So I'll start telling the tale a little bit. So I took it, I got on BART, I had a headache. I didn't feel overamped in the classic way that people describe, like agitation, racing heart. I just had a headache, and I got to my car where I had Imitrex in the car, and I used the Imitrex, and that may have been one of the ultimate problems as well. So what meth does is, like I mentioned, it shrinks blood vessels, and that's exactly what abortive migraine medication does as well in the blood vessels of the brain. So I had two medications on board that were synchronous in that way, and causing such potent vasoconstriction that my blood pressure went very high, but I didn't find out how high until I was in the ambulance. So combining a stimulant with a medication and not being aware of potential interactions, that was obviously error. And finally, I didn't have any risk factors or any kind of accident or stroke. Because I don't have family or personal history, I've got great cholesterol, I was patting myself on the back, like, I'm good. So I got in my car, drove to get some gas, opened the car door, and I could not move my left leg to get out of the car. It was very bizarre. That's not ever happened to me before, where you command somebody to move and it doesn't happen. It felt normal. It wasn't numb or anything like that. I thought, damn, this is one hell of a headache. What a migraine. I tried to get out of the car, place along the car. I called 911. By the time the paramedics got there, I was losing strength in my left arm. And from my background, I knew that that was kind of an ominous sign. They took my blood pressure. It was about 160 over 260 or 180. So at that point, I knew what was going on. that it was likely a bleed in my brain from the high blood pressure. And indeed it was. I ended up being in the hospital for over 4 weeks. But I love to tell like these little anecdotes. Like, there's a lot of dark humor in it. Like, I have to laugh because I put too much in my blood and it goes to overdose. You know, it's so,
Try to put it back just a little bit. It got better for a minute.
oh gosh, you guys, I'm so sorry. Well, I'll just try to finish up. I lost my train of thought though. So one of the things I just wanted to was, you know, there is no reversal for meth or any kind of stimulant overdose. Really, there can just be supportive measures like antihypertensives, lower blood pressure. Also, because of where the weed was in my brain, they could not give me benzos to bring me down. So I ended up in Redwood City in the ICU while they were waiting whether or not to do surgery to take off part of my skull. And I was in the ICU, like, leaking and sweating and so like, and just lying there thinking about my life. And at this point, I'm paralyzed from the neck down on my left side as I remained for 2 months. I was away for 55 hours in ICU, listening to the monitor thing. I think, you know, either something snapped almost like in a funny way after all that time. It was just such an interesting and surreal experience, honestly. You know, and today I want to say a lot about physical therapy, and I just have still some problems with my leg. But I am doing well otherwise, and I'm really glad because only about a quarter of people are able to return to their regular functioning of their lives, and about half of people die who have a hemorrhagic stroke as a result of meth use. So that's my story, and I'm happy to answer any questions about anything I've said. I'll stick my email address up. I hope you heard some of it.
Thank you so much, Daniela. We're so glad that you have recovered and are still with us. And thank you for powering through with the sound issues, and thank you everyone for your patience. There's always some technical issues. So thank you, Daniela, for all of that. And so our next speaker is Wayne from the Stonewall Project here at the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. I think you've got a screen share.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna share my screen. So a little PowerPoint for you all. So my name is Wayne Rafis. Thanks for the introduction. I use he, him, they, them pronouns. You can use them interchangeably, switch them up, it's totally fine. I'm talking a little bit today about Prop for All and contingency management principles to address stimulant use disorders. Prop for All is a collaboration between Syringe Access Services and the Stonewall Project. Stonewall is a counseling program that supports clients through a harm reduction lens to address substance use, mental health symptoms, and HIV prevention. Okay, so next slide. Today we're going to define what contingency management is. We're going to discuss how contingency management can be used for stimulant use disorders, and we're going to talk briefly about how we're implementing this program at the 6th Street Harm Reduction Center, and if we have time, we can answer questions. Okay, so what is contingency management? Behavioral psychologists will tell you that contingency management is the thought or idea that if you reward someone for a behavior, that behavior is much more likely to increase. An example of that would be, let's say you have a child and the child gets an A on an exam, you might take them out to a restaurant or buy them a cool new toy. That toy or incentive or reward becomes a reinforcer and can increase their motivation. And behavioral psychologists believe that your child will be much more likely to get AIDS in the future. And if you look at the size, it's a behavioral therapy that uses motivational incentives, tangible incentives to help a person become abstinent from drugs and alcohol. It can encourage sobriety, and we use drug-free urine specimens or samples to document what incentives that a client will receive. The other basic principle behind this intervention is that drugs and alcohol make folks feel good. I mean, people use drugs and alcohol to feel better, to escape from life circumstances. So if you think about a person who has a life that is very challenging, maybe they've lost employment, they've lost their job, they are not in contact with their family, they've lost the other rewards in their life, a person could turn to drugs and alcohol to feel better. And eventually, with continued use, the drugs or alcohol can become the reinforcer. Behavioral therapists believe that eventually with prolonged use that drugs and alcohol actually hijack part of the brain that's over rewards. And so like I said, the drug or alcohol actually becomes a reward. We see people down at 6th Street who have lost contact with family and unemployment, have unstable housing. And what we do in our program is we really try to address their stimulant use with this intervention in a really positive way. POP is Positive Reinforcement Opportunity Project. We work with people through a strength-based approach, as opposed to coming down hard on someone or yelling at them about their substance use. People in the field will tell you that that does very little to support their goals, and it's not an effective tool or an intervention to reach people. And I just want to say that when I'm talking about incentives or rewards, we're talking about, in this context, in this program, we're talking about gift cards. So a person could come in, let's skip here first. A person could come in and let's say that, sorry, technical issues. Sorry, let's say that they come into the program. What we want to do is really monitor their use, and how we do that is a low-cost urine test. So a person come in, they do the urine test. If the urine test comes back without substances, they can earn an incentive, and it starts off as little as $2. We operate the program 3 times a week. So they come in the second time and the urine is without substances, they can earn $2.50. The third consecutive time, they earn $2.75 plus an $8.50 bonus for continued abstinence or reaching their goals. If a person comes in and their urine has substances in it, like I said, we don't come down hard on them. We have conversations with them. We have a licensed clinical person that they can talk to if they want to address trauma or PTSD or some other mitigating circumstances that might be fueling their substance use. Counseling is opt-in or opt-out. We don't force anyone to do that. It's really based on the client's intrinsic motivation for change. At the 6th Street Harm Reduction Center, we offer harm reduction strategies to reduce the harms that could be caused by drugs and alcohol. And I think that Ro, I love Ms. Ian and Patrick, how they talk about, and Rob talk about the steps that we take to support people to reduce the risk associated with their substance use. We invite people to come back again if their urine comes back with drugs in it. Like I said, this program is not punitive in nature. We seek to build people up, not tear them down. The evidence behind contingency management is it is the most effective non-pharmacological treatment for initiating abstinence. We talked about buprenorphine earlier, how you use buprenorphine to support people who are struggling with opioid addiction. And along those lines. So at PROP, our services are low threshold. The program welcomes anyone who's interested in changing their relationship to stimulants with support and harm reduction strategies. Like I said, We do offer $5 gift cards to folks if they want to sit down and have more intensive conversations about harm reduction and how they can reduce their risk. We talk about abscesses. We talk about soft tissue infections that can happen that was spoken of earlier. And we don't require people to be abstinent to take part in our program. But people who complete or test non-reactives for stimulants get paid incentives. Some of the other, I think, rewards in the program is that we have a lounge that we set up. Our lounge is very warm and welcoming and inviting to the community. It's a very safe space. We redirect people who are having challenges in the space, like around racism or sexism or transphobia or ableism. We really want to create an environment where people feel safe and brave to talk about why they're using substances and what's going on with their substance use. Drop-in peer support is provided 3 times a week, like I said, and clients have access to a licensed clinical staff for more intensive counseling needs. One of the things I love that we do in this program is we provide warm handoffs at the 6th Street Harm Reduction Center. Maybe Rob and Ro can talk about some of the services that are up there, but I think they're pretty awesome. We have HIV, STI, hepatitis C testing and medication support. The Harm Reduction Center is non-judgmental. It's a place for people to come and feel really supported as human beings. Next slide. So shelter in place, a lot of folks ask me, Wayne, how are you implementing this program and keeping the program going through COVID? COVID has really impacted all of our abilities to work one-on-one or face-to-face with our clients, with people that are coming in with challenges. And I would also say that a lot of the people that we see down at 6th Street are street homeless, and they are struggling daily to meet their basic needs. They struggle with PPE, they struggle with food and water, they struggle with having someone to talk to in a very respectful way where they'll be treated like human beings. And so we offer all of that down at the 6th Street Harm Reduction Center. And so to increase engagement or to maintain engagement with folks, some of our groups at Stonewall went to virtual, which was great for folks who have the capacity to do so. But we found that at 6th Street, a lot of our clients didn't have or do not have access to technology, phones or computers. And if they do, sometimes they get ripped off. DPW can come in and dissolve a site and all of the things would be thrown away. So right now what we're doing is we're doing phone call-ins. I talk to people 3 times a week. It's a brief counseling about substance use. It's counseling about the 5 domains in their life, or if they're seeing a doctor, do they have people in their lives that are supporting them? Do they have access, or do they know that the 6th Street Harm Reduction Center is open if they want access to clean works to prevent any type of infection or something happening in their bodies? We have been successfully able to virtually engage 21 participants from March to August, sorry. And as of August 14, 2020, we're starting to meet with people again on Fridays from 5 to 6:30 to do some more one-on-one engagements with people. I think that people love this program because, like I said, it's not all about incentives. People are learning new skills or relearning some of the skills that maybe they've forgotten when their substance use started. They have a positive, strong environment to step into. And the accountability for their substance use is really on them and what they want to do with their substance use. We use person-first language. We don't call our folks addicts or crackheads or tweakers, which I think is critically important to building rapport and relationships with people so that they feel comfortable and trust you to talk about some of the issues or factors that are causing their substance use to increase. So that's a little bit about contingency management. I kind of flew through that really quickly because I wanted to give opportunity for folks to ask questions. If you always like, I'll share my email and my phone number with you, so you can reach out. We can have a conversation about referrals, or we can talk about the intervention, how it's working and how it's going. This intervention actually started in October of 2019, and we've seen some really good success with our participants and many folks who, if you just look at them, you're like, oh my God, how is this person going to organize themselves to be able to work on their substance use goals? But you have to realize that our folks are extremely resilient. They know how to take care of themselves. They know how to exercise good judgment. And when they're given the opportunity, they can change and make positive things happen in their lives. So thanks for giving me time. If you have questions, it's all good.
Yeah, so if folks have questions, please put them in the Q&A. Wayne, Prop for All is a little different from Prop, which has been a contingency management program in place at Stonewall for years. What are the main differences between Prop and Prop for All?
Well, first I want to highlight Rick Andrews, Associate Director of Contingency Management, my supervisor. He's been implementing this intervention, I want to say, successfully for 10 years. And so we sought to build upon that and expand that to 6th Street. We've had conversation about meth and fentanyl and the increase in overdoses and how we really want to address some of those disparities. So the differences are Prop for All invites everyone who wants to partake in the program, they can come. And traditionally, Prop has been for gay, bi, and trans men to address their substance use. I think what happened in this program, people saw success. People were feeling good about the interventions that were delivered. And so we wanted to expand it to a group of people, quite frankly, that don't get offered a ton of resources in a very respectful, non-judgmental way, utilizing harm reduction and the strategies that go along with it. So those are the two differences. The other difference is that when COVID was not around and we were able to have a lounge, we will actually bring food in to support people to address some issues of poverty. And one of those big issues was just having something to eat. And I just want to lift up previous staff who worked in the program. They really wanted to implement something that would support people in meeting their goals. And just think about trying to work on your goals and you're hungry and you haven't eaten all day, or you haven't had an opportunity to get off your feet and sit down because there's not a lot of drop-in spaces in San Francisco for folks to do that. And even if they're in an encampment, those encampments get dissolved all the time and they lose all of their stuff, like I said. So there's really no place for folks really to come and feel like a person. Because a lot of times our people get stepped over, they get ignored. And if you think about public stigma, and that continually happens on a day-to-day basis, people start to internalize that. So those are just the two differences in the program. We use the same model. The incentive schedule is the same. For 12 weeks, if a person doesn't take out incentives, once they earn like $5, you can come in and get a $5 gift card. If a person wants to wait the 12 weeks, they can get a gift card for $330, which a lot of our folks like that. And I think a lot of our folks like that they're getting up and they're earning something because this is what they want to do. And they've been given the opportunity to do so.
Great, thank you, Wayne. I'm a big fan of contingency management, and it's been great to see it get rolled out to the 6th Street harm reduction folks as well. And I'm glad to see it in action and see it working. So one question that I wanted to ask folks, and Wayne already addressed this very directly, but what impact have you seen from COVID-19 and shelter in place? How has it changed what you're seeing in San Francisco or how you're providing services? Ro and Rob, do you want to say a few words about how it's changed?
I think on one, like just on a basic like supply level, what's changed is it's made it, you know, we were always giving out safer smoking supplies, but it really drove the point home even more and provided, you know, if there was any kind of pushback from DPH or anyone, it provided that moment of like, no, this is a COVID prevention measure to make sure people have safer smoking supplies. So, you know, it should have been enough that it was preventative of hepatitis C, but COVID kind of gave it that extra little punch where it was just like, no, this is part of COVID prevention that we have to give out safer smoking
Great. Daniela, how have things changed for you with COVID?
Well, we've noticed a lot more inconsistency in the drug supply. Can you hear me a little better now? Hey, great. There's definitely different product coming in on a variety of products. Then there's some scarcity we've mentioned the heroin in lieu now of fentanyl, but also there seemed to be for a while people trying new, less expensive substances when their drug of choice was not available or too expensive. So there seem to be some new users out there, and people just don't know what's in their drugs. And unfortunately, that's why we desperately need some kind of drug checking service going on.
For sure. Miss Ian and Patrick, how have you seen things change since shelter in place started?
I think one of the main things for just me personally is I think with definitely more at the beginning, a little bit less now, but it was a lot harder for people to make money informally, I guess you could say. So it was like, no, you couldn't be outside panhandling, no busking, even like petty theft stuff wasn't possible because
the stores were closed.
Exactly. The pawn shops were closed. A lot of people who were even selling stuff outside just weren't there anymore. And so people were angry, I would say, in a short way to say it, just that people didn't have enough money, people didn't get enough dope to stay well, and people were just frustrated. A lot of people who even went to a lot of different groups, would sometimes that was like their only social outing for their week every week. Now didn't have a group, and they don't have access to computers, so they can't do Zoom. And so we're getting a lot of people who are coming in with really extreme emotions in any one direction just because they need attention. They need like someone to talk to. And it comes at us a lot of times not in the most nice or well-meaning way. So it's been like we're handling it, but it's also like it's a lot on us just to hold a lot of emotions for everybody, just trying to handle what this new routine and lifestyle is like. What about for you?
Not like, this isn't really negative or positive or anything, but I definitely have noticed an increase of people coming in who are just coming in for the alcohol pads and the sanitary stuff, and not really having any interest or even probably ever using needles or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I notice a lot more people, coming in for that stuff. So, totally. I don't know. It just, obviously the COVID has affected everybody differently, but I feel like for me personally, like, because I was able to keep working, it really didn't affect me too much, I don't know.
Yeah, our jobs just got harder.
Yeah, a little bit, because people are crazy.
We say that in a non-stigmatizing way.
Right, totally.
Rob, did you want to add something?
Yes. I think one thing that we really saw, like for mobile SaaS, was a lot of increased encampments, and so we had to just kind of like fill that need with increased outreach. Where we're at now is still, no matter doing outreach almost every day, we're still not able to serve all the encampments that have popped up across the city. And there's been encampments that have popped up, I think, in areas of the city where normally or historically they would have been shut down immediately. So I think that's just one thing that we saw. And then across that outreach, just the amount of foil that is going out, and I'm imagining for fentanyl, is really high. And so we tried to like prepackaged kits, and it's hard to even keep up with the kits we need to do outreach.
Great, thank you. So one more question from me, and then I'm going to dig into, we've got some great questions coming in through the Q&A, but I'm moderating this panel, so I get to ask this question. What impact, if any, do you think that supervised consumption services would have on what you're seeing now and your ability to meet people's needs? Ro and Rob? Either one of you? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I definitely think that I just want to say, like, we definitely know that supervised consumption spaces would have to also include smoking, since this new phenomenon of smoking fentanyl is definitely connected to overdose, and and this is why, I mean, it's why we did all this work around the foil, was to get people in. I think also, right in this moment, I think it could be really challenging to operate one of these spaces with all the cleaning protocols and social distancing, but I totally think that it would be doable, and people would benefit as they would for everything else. Kind of let Rose speak too.
Yeah, hi, sorry. Just kind of missed that for a second. I was typing in the chat answering somebody's question. Are we just talking about safe consumption spaces?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
difference.
I mean, they would make a huge difference, right? And they would have to include smoking at this point, because we have such a huge population of folks that are smoking fentanyl. And it's just that moment of having someone else there, right? Like when you have a fatal overdose, it's usually because no one else was there to reverse the overdose. And so by having a safe consumption site, you're gonna have that built in. I think what will be interesting is when we do, I'm gonna be hopeful, so I'm gonna say when we do get to that point, is how we wanna roll them out. What will they look like? I think if, that aspect can become challenging. I think if it's way too sterile, or way too clinical, people might not be apt to use them. So I think it's important for us when we get closer to this to think about how we want to roll them out, and that will play a role in how effective they are. Because we could have the best intentions, but if no one feels like it makes sense for them to use them, or it doesn't feel good to use them, or it feels risky to use them, it won't be effective either. So I think that's something to think about.
Yeah. Daniela, Miss Ian.
I think about safer consumption spaces and harm reduction in general, specifically syringe access, as just being that first line of contact with someone who may not be engaged in services in any other fashion. So I think one thing that it would do is just increase people's availability and exposure to services that can actually improve their lives in ways other than just preventing overdose.
Can I jump back in for a sec, Laura?
What?
Can I jump back in for a second?
Yes.
It's just kind of piggybacking on what Daniela said. Like in a lot of ways, I would see it like how we're set up at the Harm Reduction Center, right? Like everything, all those ancillary services that are on site. So someone might just come there to use it for, overdose prevention, but everything else is also there. So maybe you'll get your hepatitis C treated, things like that. So I think I think what we do at the Harm Reduction Centers in non-COVID times, especially, is kind of like how you would want to build it out. So there are all these other things available that someone, when they feel like it, that's there for them.
Miss Ian, Patrick, how would things be? How would your participants want to see supervised consumption services?
For me, I think our big push is always that the culture around using drugs for a lot of people is to have like sort of a comfortable spot, and there's a lot of ways that you can make a space uncomfortable for someone, because it just feels very vulnerable to be using drugs in front of people you don't know. So there has to be a lot of work done just to create a good vibe in the space where people will feel safe. And and I guess we're sounding like a broken record, but we definitely always push for that. In that way, then people who use drugs should be the majority of the employees working a space like a safe injection facility, and that the space should be designed also by people who would use the space. But there are always going to be people who won't feel comfortable there, and that's also why we should have a lot of them, not just like one big one, but a lot of, you could have one big one, but you could also have like a lot of smaller ones where people feel just, yeah, have a little bit more of a homey feel, because it would be just a shame, like especially in a situation like this, if we were to open up a real big safe injection facility like Insight or something in Vancouver, and it would only get to like one demographic, or we're not nearly reaching enough drug users just because the majority found a reason why they don't like to go in there, right? It can be a lot of different reasons. So, and we've had a lot of those conversations, but yeah, it would be really cool if we get that bill passed or whatever it needs to happen to get it started, to start those conversations again too, to start it going.
Yep, you and me both.
I vote yes.
Thank you. And Wayne, how, you've done all of this work to integrate Prop for All into the 6th Street harm reduction site. How do you feel like contingency management or something like Prop for All would work in a supervised consumption site?
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing to give folks an opportunity to attach themselves to an intervention that lifts them up and supports their substance use and their substance use goals, because it really should come from our participants. When I think about safe consumption sites, I think about I echo everything that everyone said. There's an opportunity for folks to get tested and treated for hepatitis C, for HIV testing. There's an opportunity for folks not to be on the street using dirty water and reusing syringes. There's so many opportunities here to engage people in a humane and loving way, as opposed to what's happening for folks on the streets right now. And I 100% agree with Ms. Ian. We have to be really thoughtful about having several sites to meet as many people as possible, because not all people are going to want to attach themselves to one side. That's because I think it can be incredibly stigmatizing to people, because once the word gets out, of course, the services will be there, but folks will feel stigmatized walking into a space. So I think we just have to be really thoughtful about that. I think it's the right thing to do, and we need to do it soon. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. So I'm going to dig into some of these questions in the chat or in the Q&A. And again, people are welcome to add more. There's a lot of really great information going by in the chat about fentanyl test strips and so on. So pay attention to that. Jennifer Lorvik, the amazing Jennifer Lorvik, asks, says she would like to hear about how people co-use meth and fentanyl. What's the timing like? Do people use them together or separately? And she's also interested in whether people co-use fentanyl with heroin or benzos. What are folks seeing out there?
Benzo use has definitely increased, because it pretty much guarantees that you get that nod that, that opiate users look for. And then it's a completely different feeling when it's used together than when it's used separately. But I mean, I think there's probably like an equal amount of people that use it together, just separately, it's not like there's not more than the other.
Did anybody talk about the stretching of the fentanyl, the speed?
Oh, right, yeah, like if you put speed on top of fentanyl, like when you're smoking it, the oils from the speed create the fentanyl to have like a longer life on the foil. Like you get more hits out of it than you would if it was just fentanyl on the foil. So that's where I've noticed a lot of people are doing that now. I noticed a lot of people who never even used to use meth, just putting some on the foil for that factor alone.
That's been just a really tiny amount. People have started it who don't even like speed because
it just increases the length the amount of hits that you can take.
Interesting. Wayne, a couple of contingency management questions. So how many of the people in the contingency management program are also using medications for treatment? And does that go hand in hand often? I'm assuming like buprenorphine or methadone.
I would say quite a few. I'm thinking about one client in particular, he went cold turkey because he was able to address his meth use and he didn't want to be on any substances, and now he's gone back on methadone. But I think a lot of our folks are doing what they need to do to take care of themselves. So I would say about half. I would say half of folks. And one of the things we're doing right now is we're talking about how do we really support people who have fentanyl use as part of their problematic substance use, and how do we really support them so that this contingency management intervention is sustainable for them. So that's a really good question. I would say about half, and I would also say that there is a program at San Francisco General that works with people to address the opioid and opiate use, fentanyl use. It's a 6-month contingency management program. And also at the 6th Street Harm Reduction Center, Rowan Robb can speak more eloquently than I can to the details about how we get people on view or how we address people who are using benzos. Yeah.
And then another question about how you measure success for folks doing contingency management. Is there a measure for success, or is it more subjective and defined by the individual?
Well, it's really subjective. When we work with people, we ask them about their goals, and they really determine what their goals will be. Sometimes it's targeted substance use. They only want to use the substance during a certain time in their life. But I have found that a lot of our clients are looking for abstinence because their substance use has caused a lot of issues in their life. So I would fall on abstinence based on what our clients tell us what their goals are. And based on that, we've had 19 people complete the program, which means they have consistently come in and delivered urine tests that are without those substances, specifically stimulants, cocaine, and methamphetamine. So I would say about 19. Right now, what we're doing is we're working on an evaluation to really look at that. This program was implemented in October, and we've been having conversations. What does success look like? But we have to keep the client's voice in this because we really don't want it to be program heavy. My whole thing is about supporting people to do what feels right in their lives. So like I said, we're developing this client satisfaction survey, and we'll talk about, did your substance use reduce or increase during this intervention, during these counseling sessions? How important was this intervention to you? And I can say anecdotally, 5-6 clients have come to me and said now they're able to work. We've had 6 clients find jobs on their own, feeling better about themselves. So there's a lot of ways that we can look at success for the program. And we're starting to do some planning around that now. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Daniela, a couple of questions for you. And now that your sound is better, hopefully we'll be able to hear you. One question, when you were in the hospital, did they provide you with any follow-up care related to your meth use? Would you have wanted any? What kind of help would you have wanted?
I have been well entrenched in the Kaiser chemical dependency program for quite a while. And well, now it's called a addiction medicine and recovery service. But they have recently started a harm reduction track, finally, for folks like me who are on Suboxone. Used to be a requirement that you had to be abstinent of everything, including marijuana, in order to receive opiate replacement therapy. which was, slightly ludicrous. And I'm really glad that they've changed that. But yeah, actually, Kaiser's pretty great about anytime that somebody comes in and it's part of their picture, substance use, they'll have someone come to the bedside multiple times during the hospital stay to offer services.
And then a question more generally about meth overdose, and is it common? Is using so much that you have unintended physiological but not physical adverse effects qualify as an overdose? And I also, I just want to, so the San Francisco Department of Public Health just came out with their 2019 substance use update, and courtesy of Dr. Phil Coffin, I'm going to post the link to it in the chat so you can see what the overdose rates, including meth overdose rates, are like in San Francisco. But then do you want to say a bit more about meth overdose and how common it is?
Yeah, sure. It's hard to say like how common is it because we don't really know like how many people exactly are out there, using it and how often. And so it's like what is the rate of incidence per event? I don't know if I can really say because there's so many variables involved. I know personally 2 other people who have had a major acute problem, one person who had a heart attack, and then there was another person in my physical rehab, who also had a meth overdose and had a stroke. So it happens, it happens 50% of the time to people who have no pre-existing conditions. And it sounds like what the person was also asking about is like overamping and how it sort of ties into like the label of overdose. You could call overamping, which is the condition of being like very agitated, usually from the adrenaline release. You could call it an overdose, but it usually doesn't result in the same sort of tremendous and devastating problems that we classically think of, for the overdose scenario. Usually if you can get people like calmed down, get their heart rate down through their breathing and try to break that cycle of it activates a sympathetic nervous system of fight or flight. So a lot of that is like between the head and the heart beating fast, and the head justifies it with like panic, and it just goes on. And so sometimes overamping, it really helps to try to get like the mental control over the situation. But if somebody's heart rate is racing for a long time, over like 180, and blood pressures, anything approaching I think hypertensive crisis is officially like 180 over 100, then people should get help just to be safe. And to maybe, just get a little bit more comfortable, because it's just not a very fun state to be in.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then Catherine Swanson asks, in reference to the allergic histamine reaction that Patrick was talking about, is anyone giving out Benadryl? Why or why not? And this was about using heroin after having used fentanyl and having the whole body like histamine reaction. And I know that Dan Cicroni was in the chat saying that I think he was saying that folks on the East Coast were giving out Benadryl. Have people tried that? Using Benadryl when you switch from fentanyl to heroin?
Personally, because I've had the reaction myself, I've never tried it, so I don't know. But that's actually not a bad idea at all. I'm just wondering if that would kind of be like too expensive to do, like to be able to provide. I guess we can use generic stuff, but Yeah, no, I've never, sorry. I've never tried it, but I don't see why it wouldn't work, because it is very much so like anaphylactic shock, like without the constricting of the body and the fucking not being able to communicate and like dying aspect of it, but like the the swelling, the red, the splotches, the intense itching, the sweating, it all happens, and it's almost like literally like instantly once you inject the heroin. But
Yeah, so Dan Ciccaroni is saying in the chat that Benadryl is a typical cut in East Coast heroin that's just included in the heroin. So I'd be interested in hearing what people's experiences of that are. And another question for Wayne. We have a harm reductionist who is now an LMSW. I think that like an LCSW. I'm not sure if that's a typo, or LMSW. She would love to use the Stonewall model in contingency management with participants. Where are the best resources on implementation of this model or any training?
Oh my goodness, if she could email me, then I could put together some resources for her. I got trained on this model from my supervisor, Rick, and then doing my own research. There is a doctor out of Washington University that specializes in contingency management and working with Native Americans around alcohol use. I will get his name. He's like an expert. I've used several of his webinars and, excuse me, and looked at a lot of the information that he put out and the research studies that the university did. And also I have a background in implementation. I've been doing this for like 20 years. So if that person wants to reach out to me, I can totally provide some tools and some ways to implement. But I also think it's really important that the person implementing the program really understand and know the people that are coming in to be served, like have a key understanding of that. And I think once you have that framework with a harm reduction framework, I think that this model can be really easily implemented. And I think that folks will love it. So just reach out to me, I'll contact you, and we can get a conversation going about contingency management. Thank you.
And one of the challenges around contingency management is that right now the federal government and the state healthcare system, DHCS, that funds Medicaid, Medi-Cal here in California, see contingency management as not reimbursable. They see it as providing a kickback to people for participating in treatment. And so despite the extensive research literature on how effective this is, and you heard Wayne talk about how it works and how successful it is for participants, it's still very hard to get it reimbursed by Medi-Cal. So that's something that the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, among others, is trying to change at the state level and try to get the laws and regulations changed at the state level so it can be reimbursed here, as well as trying to work at the federal level. But it's a good example of how bad and stigma centered policy prevents people from accessing the kind of effective treatment that they want to be accessing. Another question out of the chat, what are the primary harm reduction messages about how to avoid meth overdose and overamping? I think Daniela touched on some of this, but what are the messages for how to avoid meth overdose or overamping?
I think some of just the basics are important there. Like, it's just, you know, overamping so subjective, right? So I think just people eating, staying hydrated can be really helpful in those moments, because we could talk about overamping could be anything from like full-on speed psychosis to just being really uncomfortable and you've been up for too many days and you haven't eaten or drunk anything and you're dehydrated. So I think it depends.
I think also those points are fantastic, as well as just being very careful about weighing out doses until you get a general idea of how much is a comfortable amount to use and in what period of time, especially with these routes of administration that are like all at once. You know, smoking, you can kind of dial it in a little bit, but if you're going to poof it or swallow it, that's a common way to overamp is swallowing it, because people could easily, you know, munch a big shard or something. So just being conscientious, especially early on, about what exactly, how much you're putting in your mouth or wherever is a great idea.
And I just, there's the Harm Reduction Coalition has a good set of messaging and information about stimulant overamping. I just put that in the chat. Taylor's asking, would an AED be effective in reversing or aiding in a crystal or stimulant overdose?
That's the Bajunk device. What is it's called?
The automatic defibrillator.
Yeah, you know, that only works if you're in like fibrillation. It only works in very specific circumstances. And I don't think that you could like cardiovert somebody back into a regular rhythm just with an AED. Yeah, there's really no medical interventions that are available, like I mentioned, specifically for stimulant overdose. There's been some ideas that you can like acidify urine and pull out stuff that way, but it's not very commonly used. It's just about riding out the symptoms. And if somebody were to go into fibrillation, which certainly is an increased risk in using stimulants, is that the electrical system of the heart can get a little itchy and funny and it can jump around, and that's essentially an arrhythmia. So in some cases it could work.
Great. All right, well, do folks, this is your time to have some last minute or last closing comments. Wayne, do you want to start us off with any closing thoughts or comments you want to leave us with?
Well, first I want to thank Ro and Rob for inviting me to be part of this and talking about Withdrawal at 6th Street. It's a new program that we're implementing at the 6th Street Harm Reduction Center. And I would just encourage people, if you're interested in contingency management principles or you need just some helpful implementation, you have some questions, I'm available for that. And also I'm working with, I don't want to ask Daniel this question, but I think I'll ask you offline because it might be a longer conversation because I'm really interested in this relation. I'm working with 3 women who were referred from General who recently had strokes, who were using meth. And I'm really interested in, I was talking to Ro, if there's a relationship between meth and estrogen or progesterone that makes them more susceptible to strokes. So that's my sidebar. But if folks have questions, please reach out to me. I'm very approachable, very available. I love talking about interventions that we can use to support people who are struggling out in the world. And then this is one of my passions. So I hope everyone has a great day, great evening, all that.
Thank you, Wayne. Miss Ian and Patrick, closing comments.
I got one. I would just say, I think there's a lot of stigma, obviously with fentanyl, and then obviously with methamphetamines, that definitely like direct towards crazy. You have to be crazy if you're using fentanyl, and meth makes you crazy, right? Isn't that what everybody knows? So I'm glad that we did this panel, first of all, but I also, because we didn't get so much into it, but I would love for people to also realize that there's a lot more people using fentanyl regularly, normally, and functionally than you would assume. And that also is true for methamphetamines, and that because you use those drugs, they do not give you psychosis immediately.
Sleep deprivation. Psychosis.
Right, exactly. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different safety precautions to take. Definitely, Daniela's stories and advice have been so great today.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, one of the things that I see a lot of is just that even when you are dealing with your own, I guess, addictions for whatever reason, that it is so much harder to kick them or change them or get different habits or healthier habits in whatever direction when people are treating you like you're in the middle of psychosis, or that you've completely lost your mind because you're buying fentanyl and using it. Like, there's no hope for you now. That's the thing I see a lot of times. And the opposite is true. So, yeah, just be mindful, especially if you have friends or family members who are using those substances, to not treat them any differently than anything that scares you less, like alcohol or something like that. That would be mine.
Great.
You?
So I dropped a link in the chat. One of the things that, we've mentioned supervised consumption sites. The bill this year is not moving forward, but we are determined to bring it back next year. And if you want to join our campaign, you can text PREVENT OVERDOSE to the number 52886, and I'll drop it in again. But please sign up and join the campaign. Daniela, final comments.
I just want to thank everyone so much for coming and being interested in this topic. Like the stigmatization and marginalization of drug communities has really fueled a lot of poor information, I think, and a lot of mythology. And I think it's time for a change. I'm ready to get loud about meth harm reduction. So stay tuned. Thanks, everybody.
Rob?
Yeah, I just to close out, like, there's like so much stuff going on in the chat and the questions that, I mean, that this conversation could go on forever. I'll definitely drop my email in the chat, and if anybody wants the notes or any of the cited information I shared, you're welcome to get it from me. That's it.
Ro?
Yeah, I guess I just want to say, again, just to pick up on the whole issue around stigma, especially like for so long we were just hearing like fentanyl's poisoning the drug supply. Oh, it's killing people, but there are people that are using it every day successfully in their day-to-day lives. And then, also to just continue to center people who use drugs in the services you provide and keep lifting up their voices and making sure they're part of your services and deciding what you're going to supply for folks, how you're going to supply it. Yeah, just keep centering people who use drugs.
Absolutely. So thank you, everyone. I want to thank Ro and Daniela for coming up with the original idea for this. Thank Emily Land and our Marcom team for all of their work behind the scenes on pulling this off. I want everyone to appreciate Miss Ian and Patrick's glow that they've got going on at the moment. And just want to say thank you to everyone for sharing your stories. And this is part of what it means to undo some of the stigma around these experiences. And this is part of what it means to center the voices and experiences of people using drugs. And in order to do that, people need to share their stories with audiences. So I want to thank everyone for being willing to share your stories, share your experiences, and help help all of us do our parts to address the stigma and lift up people who use drugs. So with that, I think, I know there have been some questions about this being recorded. It is being recorded. If you want to contact Emily Land, eland@sfaf.org. Maybe Emily can drop her email in the chat in terms of getting access to a recording. There it is, eland@sfaf.org. Wayne's slides will be available there. It sounds like Rob's notes as well, but Emily is the person who'll be coordinating that. And so, yeah, huge thanks and acknowledgement of International Overdose Awareness Day. Thank you to the AIDS Foundation, the San Francisco Drug Users Union, and Glide for being a part of this. And thank you to the I think we were up to like 200 people who called in to listen to all of this. I hope you got some useful information out of this that you'll be able to put to use in your lives, in your programs, and your services. So with that, I think we're going to end there. You're too much. Thank you. So much glamour. All right. Thank you, everyone.